Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the Blokes podcast. Ryan Hassan from the Centre for Healing here, joined by the Sultan of Steel, the Cape Crusader of Macrae, Myndfit's own Nick, the Sultan of Steel, Sutherland. Nico, how you doing, mate?
Um, I'm doing gratefully. I'm very grateful that I've got all these tools at my disposal, at my resource, because there's a lot going on right now, and the Sultan of Steel is being tested, and no, we're doing okay though.
Beautiful. That's what all the tools are for. I tell people like all these things, like it's great and we'll use them when things are going okay in quotation marks, but pulling out the tools and using them when things are getting tough and avoiding getting into, as you would call it, destructive thinking and complaining and all that kind of thing. That's when we got to whip out these tools and put them to good use.
Or even if you find yourself in destructive thinking, that's where we do a mental rep and pull ourselves out of it and back into constructive. We're gonna get kidnapped by the ego. We're gonna disappear into judgment and criticism. It's gonna happen. But yeah, that's where we do the work. Is in those moments.
Are you saying that we're not going to be perfect?
Yeah, sorry.
That's one
Yeah.
thing that I hear. I used to hear a bit, and we have to sort of break it to clients early on. They start doing this work; it opens up a whole new world to them, and they're seeing things differently and reacting differently. But a lot of people they get an idea that there's like a finish line, and they're like, "So I'm going to get to this point." They mightn't have verbalized it yet, but it's internal. I think, well, I'm going to get to this point where all of a sudden, absolutely nothing bothers me. I'm never going to get in a negative emotional state, and everything's going to be piss easy from here on out.
Yeah, we talk to clients about this is your apprenticeship, and when you finish a program, that's where you start your journey.
Yes.
And they're like, "What?" And I said, "So the three amigos, we must be loved and liked. I must be perfect, and I must get what I want." The antithesis for those is, I don't know if I've done this with you yet. All right, so I'm going to provide some stimulus, and I want you to check in on how you feel when you receive this
Let's
stimulus.
do it. Bring it on.
All right, you ready? Ryan, you are ignorant, you are incompetent, and you are mediocre.
Yes, yes, and yes. I
Now,
feel
people,
seen.
you feel seen.
I feel seen. I can't give you an argument.
So it's so interesting when I deliver this, and I eyeball people when I give them this in the first session, and it's like just because it's and people have a very different response. Some people get their heckles up and they get very defensive and fuck you, Nick. Yeah, fucking, I'm not ignorant. And I'm like, "Oh, okay, wonderful response." Other people are like, "Oh yeah, yeah, no, that makes sense," but they're agreeing with it not in a healthy way that resonates with them. Yes, I'm ignorant. Yes, I'm like it's a put down. Um, but the reality is that we are all ignorant, incompetent, and mediocre to some degree, and that's okay. We can't know it all, see it all, do it all, have it all, be it all. So there's this beautiful paradox where we talk about people operating from this sense of deficiency. I'm not good enough, or I don't have enough, or I'm not getting enough, or whatever. So there's that sense of deficiency. But on the other hand, when I just surrender to our deficiencies, I am ignorant, incompetent, and mediocre. So I say to clients at the start of the program, right, at the end of the program, there's going to be a version of you that finishes your 12 weeks or your 12 months or whatever. And that version is going to leave here, and guess what they're going to be? And they're like, oh, enlightened and perfect. And wow. I said, no, they're going to be ignorant, they're going to be incompetent, and they're going to be mediocre to just of a lesser degree. And that's still okay. And they're like, oh, and some people are like, well, what's the point of the program then? I'm like, well, you'll find out. You'll
Yeah.
find out.
Maybe it's being okay with being mediocre, ignorant, and incompetent.
Yeah. Maybe it's a client. Oh, man, this dude has performed one of the greatest acts of self love. I think I told you about him. He's just completely surrendered, handed himself over, and he's just in his relationships at home. He's just yep, okay, yep, I understand. There's no ego involved at all. And his wife said it's like you've had a lobotomy. And he's like, oh, okay, yep, okay, yeah, I've had a lobotomy, sure. And I said to him, maybe just go home and tell her that you've had an egoectomy instead. You
Yes.
haven't had a lobotomy, you've had an egoectomy. And he's like, okay, I've had an egoectomy. Yeah, he's just this, he's
Equanimous.
just, he's just this dude who's okay, yep, okay, yep,
Yeah.
okay.
So be it.
It's, yeah, the transformation. I think I told you did a 12-week program in the last session. He finally broke down. He finally surrendered, and yeah, big tears, and we realised his insecurities and everything, and and he was like that tight knot in a muscle that finally relaxed and released. And I said, now we can do the work. So then he went from a 12-week program into a 12-month program. Um,
Fantastic.
yeah, but it was just this act of surrendering. I haven't seen on that scale since I did it, you know,
Yeah.
many
That's
moons ago.
amazing. That would be quite amazing to witness for you, I'm sure.
Mm,
It's
mm,
just on the topic of lobotomy, it'll tie into what we're going to talk about a bit later.
yeah.
But for those that, think that, right now we're at the cutting edge of like mental health treatment and that the medications and everything are, fantastic and there's not much room for improvement. It was only a few decades ago that we were sticking ice picks up people's nose and scraping away at the prefrontal cortex of their brain in order to help them with mental health issues. Wasn't that long ago, Nico?
Oh, it was 1996. It was still illegal for husbands to rape their wives in England.
Oh my God. One that I bring up all the time, and it's actually going to tie into something else I want to share in a minute, is that it was only the 1980s where the medical industry acknowledged that babies under the age of 2 felt any pain. So before that, it's like, oh, they don't remember it, so it's not a problem. And so they would perform if a baby needed a procedure like surgery or something like that. All they would give them is like, instead of painkillers, they'd give them a paralyzing drug so they couldn't move, but they could still feel everything. Now, you want the definition of torture? That's it right there. And it makes my skin crawl to think about it. The 1980s, that was not that long ago.
Just give them a dummy, they'll be right. A pacifier will just pacify them.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, and where do we get off? We're honestly thinking that we are these amazing enlightened, but like, just glance back, glance around us now. We don't even need to go back a couple of decades. Have a look around at what we're doing in this day and age, and it's oh,
I
I
know.
get sad.
I know. And I'm about to tell you, I got sad from something that happened the other day. Before we do that, I've got to do a shout out. We went through it on last week's
Oh yeah,
episode, and I
yeah.
forgot. Alison from Canada, a big shout out to you. Alison has been following along,
Hey,
listening.
Alison.
Alison, so she's commented on the YouTube video, The Power of the Mind episode, back at episode number 71. So refreshing. Shout out from this British Canadian. Thanks. Well, she's given us a shout out and we're going to give her one right back. Alison, we appreciate you. We appreciate you following along with the show and we hope you are taking some value. So thank you for that.
And
Now,
love that you took the time to actually let us know and make the
exactly.
comment. So,
Yeah. Can you stop scratching the speaker of your computer then, Nick?
yeah,
Um,
you're so pedantic.
I'm sorry. I'm a little bit pedantic. I'll own that. So, two things in the last 2 days have made me cry. All right. One has made me cry with joy, love, and gratitude and appreciation. The other one has made me cry for sadness and hurt.
Before you go into
Yeah, I know you're going to do
why,
semantics, made me cry.
no,
Okay.
no, 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 I'm not. No, I'm
Okay.
not. Don't jump to that. Don't jump to that conclusion.
Sorry I made that
Uh,
assumption, Nick.
yes, it makes an ass out of you and me.
Yes.
Yes. I was just talking to Shane earlier this morning about if we could collect the tears. This sounds a bit morbid now. I'm saying it out loud. Not to drink. We don't want to drink the tears. If we could collect the tears from people who were crying with joy and crying with sadness and crying with grief, and we could analyze those tears, I wonder if the chemical compound of them would be different.
I
It'd have to
wonder.
be.
Yes, it would have to be. Yeah, I know that Dr. Emoto. Have you seen that one? Who did the water study?
Mm.
Yeah, that I wonder if he thought of doing that or maybe experimented with that, because he would take water crystals and he would treat water differently, as in he would, have water and put the word hate on it, or the word love or that kind of thing, or play different types of music and then analyze the molecular structure of the water crystal under a microscope, and it looked drastically different. It's quite incredible. And I imagine that would be the same way with tears, surely, because it's coming from our body, and the body is in a certain biochemical state, emotional state at the time.
A school, incidentally, we've spoken about this in an early podcast. A school tried to replicate his stuff and found it to actually not be factual.
Yeah. Have we spoken about that?
Yeah.
I'll have to research that.
All right, so I'd love to learn what.
So I just had the vision of like having like a little mantelpiece with these little vials, and I'm like, these are my sadness tears. Here are my joy tears.
Here's my grief tears.
My shameful wanking tears.
And they created while you're wanking.
How come that one's in a bottle and not a small vial?
How come there's a vat?
It's that giant barrel in the corner, Ryan.
It's my wanking shame tears.
It's a little bit out of balance here. Like, yeah, okay. We probably should put that somewhere else.
Just hide it away.
Also, can you put that blanket back over that vat in the corner, please? It look like a table.
Why is Tommy? Don't let Tommy swim in there. Don't let Tommy swim in that pool.
I told you, don't put it in the garage. I need it later.
All right. Sorry, listeners.
I'm crying again, third day in a row. These are humour tears.
Collect them. Right.
So, yep. So two things last 2 days. Do you want to start with the joyful one or the sad one?
Yeah. Oh, anyone that comes to mind first.
All right, I'll do the sad one.
Okay.
So I spoke about how the babies, the medical industry not acknowledging pain. One of the big passions I have is trying to educate people around developmental trauma, things that happen in those developing years, and oftentimes things that, yes, the overt things that happen to a human being, but also products of a lot of Western culture.
Are those formative years important? What?
All right, Mr. Facetious. They seem to play a role.
Okay.
And so I'm obviously really aware of that. And then I obviously, educate on it. And I talk to people who like they're into it because they're in my courses or that kind of thing, or I speak to other practitioners and they get it. And then I'm sure you've had this over your time, Nick. I've had it with, drug discussions and that kind of thing. Whereas like you move in certain circles and you start to think like, oh, society gets it. Like we're moving in the right direction. Then something happens where you're like, oh no, they don't. It's this kind of deflated feeling. Have you had that before?
I think I just generally feel sad about humanity anyway.
Yeah.
So I don't tend to. No, not really. I'm joking. Oh yeah, I guess so. I have I'm just thinking off the top of my head quickly. My general perception of humanity, I am hopeful for humanity, but I'm realistic in what humanity is. So I don't tend to get too deflated, no.
Yeah, I did. So what happened? We're at Kmart, me and Tommy, and we're looking at the new dinosaurs that new Jurassic World movie coming out in a couple of weeks.
Loves dinosaurs.
Mate, right into them. And I saw sort of down the end of one of the aisles, this like little girl, and she would have been like 2 at the most, right? And she's kind of by herself. And, there's this bubble mixture thing. There's these big bubble, like cylinders of bubble mixture. It's like a wand. And like if you unscrew it, you can wave the wand and there's bubbles. She's like literally 2, maybe less. And she's unscrewed it and doesn't know what she's doing. And so the bubble mixture's starting to go onto the floor. And so then I kind of turn around. I see a dude sort of walking quite fast this way, a bit away. I'm like, oh, that'll probably be the dad. And I started walking off with Tommy. And see, yeah, this look in his eye, and I'm like, oh man, he looks pretty upset. And anyway, he sees her. I didn't see it because I'd already walked away a bit, but I heard it. He's seen that she spilt it. He hit her, and then grabbed her and picked up and started pacing off. And she's obviously started crying because her father just hit her. And then I can kind of hear briefly, him walking away, kind of yelling at her to stop crying. And I just, at first, I was like, I wanted to go and grab him by the throat and throw him up against the wall. And then after a minute or so, this anger and rage started to subside, and I just literally started crying in the middle of Kmart because I was just thinking of the tens of thousands of times that exact thing is happening in that simultaneous moment all around the world. And we wonder why, as a society, we struggle so much with mental health, we struggle so much with addictions, we struggle so much with stress, we struggle so much with needing to get onto the next moment and work or maintain busyness to some degree. We have so much trouble being alone, is because you can take an innocent child who has done nothing wrong, hit them, make them cry, and then immediately tell them to stop crying when you're the one who's caused them to cry. And it broke my heart so much that I felt for her and anyone like her in the world.
Well, I fear for you and for her and for him. I'm just,
Yeah,
in that moment, I understand that initial rage, but an eye for an eye and the world goes blind. We become what we don't like in the world if we act in that way. So, yeah, it's that man needs compassion, but it speaks of, when we talk to clients in here about EQ, that emotional intelligence, self awareness, self management. He had none of that. And then social awareness, and then relationship management. He could do none of that. So the Ram Dass expression, we're all just walking each other home. Yeah, we need to walk our kids home and do a better job of walking our family and friends home and society home. But we can't do that until we can learn to walk ourselves home first. So this man wasn't able to walk himself home. He's in no position where he can then give to his relationships what they require, which is love, tenderness, compassion, understanding. So you're right. It's sad on many levels, but it's also reality. So we work with it and go, okay, it's not outside the realms of possibility or probability this is going to happen. We have to work in the reality, not the reality what we would like to happen. And I have to surrender every day to that. Surrender any desires for a utopian world and just go, and I tell clients the story of when Buddha reached enlightenment, and I think I've told you, and the birds flying and the leaves falling from a tree, and the woman's being bashed or the child's being bashed, and we sit there in that moment in our ego, in our judgment, and go, that is bad, that is wrong. But we don't know, because if that's going to leave an imprint on that little girl. But if she grows up and goes, right, I'm going to teach, because of that moment, she then takes martial arts and she goes on to win an Olympic gold medal, and she then teaches all these other girls to defend themselves, and so on that surface level in that moment, it's terrible. It's tragic. On a deeper spiritual level, we don't know. So
yeah, you don't know the outcome. Yeah, it's so true. And I think that as initial, the anger that I had, the rage, this ego reaction, and then it dissolved. It's like I realized, even though it doesn't seem like it, like he's doing the best he can with the capacity and the knowledge that he has. And then all of a sudden, I just thought, I think I probably just felt a bit of collective suffering in that moment of all that was going on, and it just it did bring me to tears. So that was a sad one.
What was the flip side?
This was yesterday. So good. Me and Tommy went out for lunch. For those who don't know, my son's 3.5. We're at this cafe and we're sitting down just eating lunch. And this is just this is why I love kids. I obviously love my son, but I just love kids. They're so in the moment, right? And so we're munching down some food. We're in like an arcade between two cafes, and people kind of walk in this arcade. There's a bit of music playing, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, maybe Tommy was into Michael Jackson songs when he was into Past Life, Billie Jean comes on, right? And he just spontaneously goes, oh, well, I've got to dance. And I'm like, all right, mate, go for it. And he gets out of his chair and stands in the middle of this arcade and just rocks out for like probably 3 songs in a row. And while he was doing that, everybody in both cafes who were sitting inside all just got glued to him. and all of them are starting to smile. Different, like, people were popping their head out the door, just going, "Yeah, buddy, go for it." And then people that were walking into the arcade were all smiling. Two like grown women separately came in and saw him, and they just started dancing with him as well. And I just saw this. I'm going to cry again. I just saw this moment where everyone, we just felt so connected. And I'm like, it's such the opposite kind of to reaction where I felt all this sorrow. I'm like, my God, human beings are basically at their core so good, and we want to feel connected. And a moment that a child can have can be that it can break down the walls that people all have up, whether consciously or subconsciously, and we all just felt so connected in that moment. So that was my my tears of joy and gratitude.
What a beautiful experience all round.
Yes.
You know, it's and this is where what we do with the work on not falling into that binary mental trap of good and bad and right or wrong. It all just is, and as a collective experience, it's a beautiful experience. There's pleasant and unpleasant in the world. There's black and white. There's yin and yang. There's sun and the moon. There's fire and water. So yeah, I don't know what, maybe Mars is in retrograde or something, or Venus is in Uranus, but it's I hope you use lube, but
Jesus.
It's
Take a deep breath before that one.
and and didn't fill up your vat afterwards. You should see Ryan's space right now.
Oh, Jesus.
But I too was having a moment of
It's bat.
It's like our teenage selves have taken over today.
I know. I'm really enjoying it.
Me too. Oh, I'm crying. Oh, where's my vat? I had a moment yesterday or the day before where I was sitting here and talking to someone about what's going on at Myndfit, and just I just allowed the sensations, the emotions in relating to it all, and just we're in such a growth. The community is going to come together, and it was just, I was just filled with this sense of gratitude. I've been having these very deep gratitude experiences lately, and it was I was just sitting there, and with clients, I cried with clients lately. A couple have been finishing their programs, and they're just describing what their life's like, and I'm a hugger now. Who would have thought? And I get to connect with people, and just sitting here listening to what people have achieved. Like, it's beautiful. This kid the other day was like, I'm taking control, and bloom. If I had hair, it would have blown my hair back, with this act of self-love, and I got emotional about that. It's so wonderful to be in the experience of things like that.
Yeah, just to see what a human being is capable of. It's like they're breaking the chains and the binds of some some past programming, that, and realizing that they can be something different, and then owning that. And there's something so incredibly inspiring to me. I heard like Joe Rogan go on a rant years ago, and he's like, I'm not that interested in talking to someone who's like, got stuff on a silver platter, or they've, haven't had too much trouble and been looked after life. Because give me the dude who's fucked up bad, and they've fucked up bad, and they've turned their life. And that's the guy at the party. I want to go speak to them, right? And that's why I think it's just inspiring to hear another human being who's, doing something differently and taking themselves out of what you would call that unnecessary suffering, and realizing that they're powerful, more powerful than what they've thought in the past.
Totally more powerful. All right, so
okay, I'm just stopped crying finally. So
good.
Medicating Normal, a documentary that Nico, you sent me. I haven't watched it yet, but I'm something that I've. Let's talk about it. You start.
Done your homework, House?
I've been busy.
Crying. Sorry, Nick. It's been had to fill the vat up this
Filling up
week.
the vat. It's been evaporating at a wild rate. Filled up.
Haven't had
So,
time to do my homework.
no, but
Yeah, so I'm gonna.
I'd like to hear some of your thoughts and what was covered, and then I'm happy to put my thoughts in because it's something that I'm very have followed for many years, and I'm interested to hear what was in it and what your thoughts were.
You could have just watched it as well, but just I'm
No,
passionate about it. It's so it came up. I'm a subscriber to the streaming service Films for Change. It's just all documentaries. It's fantastic, and yeah, this email came through. This is what's being released and medicating normal, and it piqued my interest. So we're having Wednesday night at our house is documentary night. So there's four of us in the house. Every week, a different person picks a different documentary. So we kicked off with Medicating Normal, US based, and it follows the lives of a few different people, mainly veterans, who have been prescribed medication and what their journeys are like. And it was, talk about sad. It was just on many levels. It was very sad, but the broad overview was that they were getting medicated for their medication, and they were on 14 different types of medication, and it was just it's completely debilitating, and it gets to the point where they have to taper off all of these medications to such a degree that even some they can't because they are so dependent on them now, and it's just the norm. That's these people are coming back from war and saying I feel sad, and the people who are there to look after them who have spoken the Hippocratic oath that it is my duty to care for you, just throw these pills at them and say, take this, you'll feel better, instead of saying, go and be sad. And it's okay, and connect, and time will, do its thing, and you'll be okay. So it was tragic on a humane level, on a community level, on a veteran level, on a personal level. I chose to be in charge of my own journey, and I never went down the medication path. I never took prescribed medication. It was tried to be forced upon me by all and sundry, a lot of these mental health experts that I'd connected with, and I defied their suggestions, and I'm really proud that I did, and really grateful that part of me took that stance. But these people had the white coat sort of, what do they call it? The white coat thing,
I know
syndrome, white coat
yes.
syndrome, where we just, doctor says this, do this. So yeah, following the lives of these different people, and the ripple effect it had on them mentally, physically, socially, it was traumatic, like really fucking hard.
Yeah. It's like, just a disclaimer, Nick and I aren't doctors or psychiatrists. This is not medical advice. If you would like to do
Hi,
anything, please
Dr.
speak to
Nick.
them. This is just our opinion. You sounded like Kermit the Frog or Jordan Peterson then. And yeah, but you can see it's a slippery slope that once it starts, it tends to kind of keep going. So it's like, I'm a human. Let's use the veteran example. So I'm a human being that I've been ordered and been put in what is quite an unnatural environment for a human being to thrive in and not pick up mental and emotional scarring, you know?
Yeah, you're seeing things that you're not designed to see on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. And so then you come back into a different environment. And, classically, we just thought, as soon as they come back, they'll be fine. But it turns out us human beings tend to carry our past experiences with us into our current reality. Funny about that. And then they feel so down and so flat. And so many people don't have the education, don't understand why. And then someone, yes, in a white coat, someone of authority says, take this, this will make you feel better. Like, of course they do. Of course, the vast majority of people do. But then that does start this cascade. And you're right. Like, I've seen it, with veterans with so many people. It's like, hey, doc, it's been 3 months. I felt good for maybe the first 2 weeks. Then I felt the same. Now I feel worse than I did previously. I'm going to stop these meds. And it's like, well, no, you can't just come off them, but we can give you some other ones to counteract what's happening with these ones. And then it just keeps going. And then all of a sudden, like you said, you're at this point where it's like, I'm told it's really dangerous to come off these. The side effects on the side of the bottle say suicidal ideation is a side effect. So who was it that said there's no side effects to the medication, there's only effects? We shouldn't keep calling them side effects. They're all just effects, right? And so,
perfect.
We're in this place where it's like, I now have to have some sort of program, and we saw it at the center over and over again, where we have to now detox in a controlled manner from things that I've gotten from a doctor. They think, oh, well, I only need to detox from stuff I get from the dealer down the street. It's like, no. These are really strong drugs that alter the chemistry of our body and our brain. And we can end up, that's why, a lot of studies show that after 6 months, over half people taking an SSRI feel as depressed or more depressed than when they started. So they've got the same problem, yet now I'm on this drug that I don't want to be on, but can't come off unless I taper off slowly in a controlled manner. So it's a really hard one.
Can you explain to listeners what an SSRI is?
Selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. So when you think of classic antidepressants like Prozac, Lexapro and the like, that's what they are. So they act on the neurotransmitter called serotonin. They stop the reuptake of that molecule in order to create more free serotonin between the neurons in our brain. So the idea is the more serotonin is associated with positive mood, the more serotonin, the more happy someone is going to be. Unfortunately, it's not quite as simplistic as that. There's a lot of other factors that go into it.
Good in theory.
It sounds great in theory. And that's once again, I mean, this is the society we live in and searching for the quick fix. Like if you literally call something an antidepressant, it's like, oh, hang on, I've got depression. That's an antidepressant. It's like an anti-venom. If I get bit by a snake, that sounds like what I need. And it's that desire that that's why we talk, Nick. It's like, can I take what you take someone through in a 12-week or 12-month program and put it in pill form? Like you'd be a billionaire. You know what I mean? But so that desire, say, please, I'm busy with all this stuff. I've got family. Just give me a pill that'll make this go away.
I've got to work. I've got to function. I've got to earn a wage. I've got to support my family. So it's a delicate conversation to have because we need to validate what people are experiencing and what they're going through. And yes, you have all these things, but I've had clients come in here and say, "Oh, I don't think I can afford to break down at this time. I've got too much to do." And I'm like, "Well, we're not talking. We're not talking a breakdown ending up in a psych ward. We're talking about a breaking down of your neurological pathways and of your patterning and conditioning and behaviours, and it's not just I can't just press a button on your forehead and you sort of collapse. Like that's not, you're not going to be completely dysfunctional. It's just a gentle change. You can call it changing instead of breaking. It's the same thing.
Yeah, but I've even had the thing. Let's say with say illicit drugs, and someone's like, "Oh, I can't stop using now because I can't afford to take 2 weeks off work." It's like, what culture are we living in where that, like, you come in here saying my life's a complete mess. I'm on the brink of like ending everything, like blah blah. Oh, but I can't take 2 weeks off work.
I had a client the other day go, okay, we at week 8 of the 12-week program, we discuss how the client's tracking and progress they're making, and is 4 weeks enough time to achieve what we want to achieve, or do they need to transfer into the 12 months? And a very high percentage of people transfer into the 12 month because they're enjoying the work and they're getting so much out of it. And this guy said, no, I can't do that. It costs too much and I can't afford it. And I said, all right, well, I understand that. But just go home and write a list of the amount that you've spent on illicit drugs and alcohol and junk food and gambling and shopping and and then just sit down and have an honest conversation about, we never say, I don't have enough money for cigarettes or alcohol. No one ever goes, I can't afford that. We always find the money for those coping mechanisms.
Yeah. Oh man, like the amount of times I would crack the shits about, something that maybe my ex-wife or someone like spent on, something, or I wouldn't buy something that was of benefit to me. Like I would have back in the day never have paid $100 to go and talk to a counselor or something. Yet
Yeah.
I could blow $1,500 on a night out, and there would not be one part of me that went, "That was a waste. That was a sound investment." It was so easily justified, but that's
Bitch,
once.
what are you doing paying $300 for a meditation retreat? And these magnesium tablets cost a fortune.
Yeah. What were these? $20? Oh my God. Next thing, who wants Jaeger bombs and a whole bunch of Vickies? My shout.
And then who wants to go speeding in their car and get a fine and then not pay your registration, and then all of a sudden end up with your car impounded and then you're at court, and like just the ripple effect.
It's hard for people to get their head around. So yeah, okay.
Medicating normal. Medicating
so
normal.
what were some of the outcomes that these people had? You said obviously it was very tragic to see the ripple effect it had into their lives. Were they taking people through a process of just documenting their journey, or were they trying to get off them, or what was it?
They're trying to get off them. So a couple of the veterans ended up going to this veteran camp where there was this wonderful psychologist. She was a commander in the Navy, and she was doing a lot of work. So they were talking about big pharma and the studies, and the issues with big pharma, obviously, and I can feel you getting sort of all.
I feel I'm about to get out of the cage. Let me out.
Yeah.
About to have some anger tears.
And all the studies and all the research is paid by big pharma, blah 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 blah. But then they found these beautiful people who were genuinely interested in the humanity of it all, and in the caring and the healing and the we talk about the hard path and the easy path in here, and the easy path is to say yes, give me medication, yes, give me a quick fix, yes, give me a pill. The hard path is to do the work, and thankfully these people have put themselves in a place where they can, like me, take people on a journey and guide them through the hard path. And this one woman who wasn't a veteran, she wore a little hidden camera and went back into her GP and said, right, this is where I was, this is what you said to me. And he's like, yeah, but that's true. No, I stick to that and da. And she says, but here's all this evidence. You're giving someone who's suicidal a medication, which the effect of it is to have suicidal ideologies. Like, in what reality does that math add up? And he's like, no, it's all good. And just so it was an insight into the system in terms of the medical system and the doctors within that, and I guess yes, I am having a crack at some of the doctors, and it was an insight into the big pharma and the pharmaceutical industry. It was an insight into the veteran community and the military system, and this one veteran, and it was so. This is talk about unnecessary suffering. If you go back to the source of what occurred in most of the cases, some general counselling would have helped. Would have been enough, right? But years down the track, he lost his wife, and and just all this stuff happened, and you just like it was so unnecessary, so much of what they experienced. So yeah, his ex-wife had been on what was she on? ADHD. She'd been prescribed ADHD and been on these drugs for 13 years or something.
Adderall.
Yeah, I think so. And I don't know, it was interesting sitting there as a family watching this, going, what's because Isaac, our son, he's been diagnosed and tried and medicated, and he's doing a really amazing amount of work at getting himself, weaning himself off a lot of the medication that he was given. And he's finding it really challenging. You know, the stuff that they've put him on, he's like, I'm feeling a lot of effects of this coming off it. So it was very close to home on that front, and as a veteran on that front. So yeah, I'd highly recommend sitting there but just sitting there and as a witness. You know, we don't have to ride these people's roller coasters. We don't have to get angry on their behalf and whatever. We can just sit there and suspend our beliefs and just watch the reality of what's going on for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's like early on, yeah, when I first started getting into this field and doing a lot of research, and I got quite frustrated and angry, and it's like we need to make change and fight the system, and we need to bring down these companies and that kind of thing. And the truth is, it's like it's better just understanding, what they are and like accepting that reality. And there's a couple of the realities that I found is, number one, medication for some people is fine as long as it's in combination with taking the hard path and doing the work. It may enable people to be able to do that work, right?
Well, if you sorry to interrupt, but I
That's
just
it.
want people to understand this. If I think we spoke about it really early on, but it's probably worth mentioning again. Um, if you are born with a physical illness that needs medicating for life, like diabetes, type 1 diabetes, you require medication, yeah, for life, and that's understandable. So mental illness, some people are born with schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, all these things. So there is a requirement for medication there, yeah. But then people, so that's endogenous depression, perhaps, where exogenous depression, circumstantial reactive depression. Um, I can't work with someone until I can reach them. You know, so sometimes medication is required short term to stabilize someone. Yeah, and that could be like a 3 month sort of journey for them. But then GPs aren't doing a good enough job of going, right, we're going to do this for 3 months, we're going to stabilize you, then we're going to link you in with a mental health practitioner who's going to take you on this journey. It's just like medicate you and out the door, next please. So there is a time and a place for medication. It is very applicable for people without mental illness if they're deep in their suffering and they need stabilising. So then a professional like you or I can access them and do the work with them.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's like that subset of people who really need it maybe for the long term is such a tiny percentage of the overall
Oh,
people that are taking it on an
yeah.
ongoing basis. And then the people who may need it for a certain period in their life, let's say for 2 or 3 months, end on it for 2, 3, 10 years. Now, what that is good for is it's good for business. Like we need to understand that we live in a capitalistic society and that pharmaceutical companies are massive business and they're in the business of selling selling products and making more profit, right? So it's like, I've gone from hating it to kind of accepting it, but it's like we should at least educate ourselves of what this is. So it's
Well,
like
you understand it now. You understand the nature of the beast, and in that you don't have the expectations that it should or shouldn't be there. It's like, well, it is there, but it's supply and demand as well. Like we have to insert ourselves into the equation, and we as consumers need to start having some self agency. Going, you know, and it's hard with the amount of advertising and then all this sort of shit. But turn your TVs off for starters, and then just really sit there and have some intervene in your own experience.
yeah, and it's like we do have to take personal ownership. You brought up the ADD thing, like the amount of adult ADHD diagnosis now has just exponentially gone through the roof. Every second person now is doing a quiz online. They've got ADHD. Now, is there factors in that? Yeah, I reckon like phones and the laptops and computers are having, and that's not to say that gives them a diagnosis. That's just said, well, I have an attention problem because I'm constantly being distracted. But more often than not, like 2 out of 3 people, if they were honest, and I can kind of see through it, they just want to be prescribed stimulants so they can justify taking a drug. you know, it's like you don't really have adult ADHD. You just want to justify and say, oh, no, my doctor gave me, Adderall or Ritalin or dexamphetamine or whatever it is and have it. But if we understand that, it's a business and like selling more products on a more reoccurring basis, is what makes these businesses incredibly profitable. And if you start to understand that where the studies are funded, how the studies are presented to people. Like, I don't know if they spoke about Xanax. I'll touch on it really briefly, because that's one when people start to get quite out of control. It's like, how can I sedate you? How can I kind of keep you quiet enough?
It's the adult dummy. It's the adult pacifier.
Yeah, so it's a really strong sedative, Xanax. And when you look into this, one of the studies that got Xanax over the line in 1987, maybe. It's like it was prescribed for panic attacks. So people are having X amount of panic attacks a week, and this medication will help them stop. And it's like they went from 0 to 8 weeks, and they went from whatever panic attacks they were having was nearly half as many a week on Xanax. And then the one that people, because what you can do, you can go into a Freedom of Information Act through courts, and a lot of people have done this to get the actual full study. Because if I'm a company, I can do 10 studies and give the FDA one. I can do a study and give them a little bit of that study. It's the equivalent of, I love Johan Hari's example, it's like when we're trying to take a selfie and we take like 20 and we're like, oh, look, crap, my nose looks funny, I'm doing, and then there's one that we put a filter on. And that's kind of the one that we present to the world, or that a company presents to the FDA.
Yeah, you've done a 10-year study, but and it looks good for you up until 7 months into it, and all the rest it trends in a terrible direction.
That's what I'm getting at. So this 8-week study said, it reduces panic attacks by half. It was actually a 12-week study, and the last 4 weeks was then taking them off Xanax to see how they performed after coming off it. Guess what? Whoop, they ended up having double the amount of panic attacks a week than when they started. But it's like, let's just give them those, cut off the end of that document and give them the 8 weeks. And this is where people can, not to say it's not applicable in some situations, this is where people can get trapped, because I saw it with so many clients at the center. Now I'm fucking terrified of coming off it, because as soon as I try to, my anxiety and panic attacks start to go back through the roof. So what do? I'm just back on it, all right? And then I'm just all of a sudden, and then I get told it's dangerous to come off it. And now I'm like, well, what the fuck do? I didn't really want to go on this stuff in the first place. Now I'm trapped taking it all the time.
But then they get angry at the system and angry at the doctors and everything. And my thing is self-accountability, and that's, you co-created this. If you don't like what's going on, you are part of the problem, so you need to be part of the solution, and stop outsourcing your anger at everyone else, and go into that, because we stay problem oriented. We need to get solution oriented. And what's part of the solution is to stop wanting a label. So many people want these labels. I'm feeling a certain way. What's the reason for this? What's the label for this? Someone go and get me that big book with all of the diagnoses that's actually getting 50,000 more diagnoses a year, and everyone's slapping labels on their heads. And I'm like, when you come in here, take all your fucking labels off. Let's just look at you as a human. Labels are important to some degree, but have a think of a big thick texter and draw a square, and that's a label. That's a box that people like putting themselves in, because it feels good. It feels better. I have ADHD. I have this. I have that. I have.
It's like I have an answer to a degree.
Yeah, I have to. Now it makes sense. I can reconcile it in my mind.
Yeah.
Where instead of that thick outlined box, if you have a perforated line, then all of a sudden it's a soft label instead of a hard label. And it's not you have this, it's you are experiencing this. You're experiencing a state of depression. Your mind works in this way. And it's not you don't have to go to jail for the rest of your life. It's not a death sentence.
Yeah. I'll get people come in and they've got like their little list prepared the first time. It's like, I have bipolar type 2 disorder, borderline personality. I have clinical untreatable depression. And then I would always say to them, okay, let's look at the symptoms of those things. Okay, so you're a human being who's experienced these symptoms along the journey. And they're like, yeah, no, but. I'm like, no buts. Yeah. no buts. Because you're right. That's I love that little visual you have. It's like this hard, straight line box as opposed to being a dotted one, where it's like, hey, I've experienced these things. Let's see if we can address those and maybe expand that box, or maybe step out of the box, because that it tends to, if we identify with it, it can confine us even more.
Well, it's it's the difference between permanent and non-permanent. That very thick outline box, people make it concrete. It's permanent. We're locking it in. I have this, and I now identify as this. Where the perforated box is temporary, and everything is temporary. In the law of nature, everything's impermanent. So all of a sudden, we don't identify it. Instead of saying I have, it's I experience, and it's not forever. It's just, I can do something and affect change around it. So really, really important for those listening with a history of labels and being in a box to really sort of stop and with someone objective and trained to start reevaluating all these
Yeah.
labels.
And so maybe give you an idea. It's like, I like to whatever I'll use a current issue I'm having, right? So I'm experiencing some back pain in my T1. It's been going on for quite a few months, and so it's like, all right, I need to take some action to try and understand and hopefully rectify this. So it's like I go and speak to different people, and one of those is a doctor, right? So it's
Mm.
like so before, me, because I've been down the path where I'm like, just give what can I take to make said thing go away, whether it's physical, mental, emotional. What can I take to make said thing go away? So then I go to the doctor and they say, okay, well, we can give you some painkillers for the pain. We can maybe give you a cortisone shot in that area, which might give you some relief for a couple of months. We can look at surgery. I'm like, okay, let me go speak to the chiropractor. Let me go speak to the osteo. Let me go to this pain specialist who does myofascial and connective tissue stuff. And so you go to these people, and then I'm like, okay, now I've got a bit of a look at how I have ownership now. I've got a menu of options from these different people. Now, what path do I want to take? Right. So I'm not blindly just accepting that. And the first point of call for so many people is the doctor. But it's like, I'm not going to see that as one of the options on a menu. That's the option. And that's what I have to do. There's no, I'm outsourcing them. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what so many people, like I speak to my parents about this stuff a bit. And because that their generation as well, it's like, you just
Mm-hmm.
go to the doctor. You just do what you're told. My
And
dad,
and you have the same doctor for 50 years.
yeah, yeah. But even then, it's like, my dad had to go to hospital. He had a fucking heart attack like a couple of months ago, and turns out it was from medications he'd been put on. Um,
Mm.
and like, all the symptoms he'd had for the previous 6 months, I'm looking through all the side effects, the effects of these,
Mm.
8 different medications. They're the exact things that is going wrong. And I've got this because we get the aftercare pack picked up from hospital. I'm like, there's like a fucking book of different medications that he's on. It's like, oh, we're going to stop that one because that fucking causes heart attacks and dizziness and blacking out. And I'm like, but then as soon as something happens the next week, bang, I'm off to the doctor. It's just this
Mm.
automatic thing. It's
Mm.
right. It's like, it's
Mm.
not a menu on the table. It's the thing.
But the root cause of all of this is fear.
Mm,
It's fear, and I'm afraid. I'm looking for a sense of security. We are hardwired as humans to feel safe and secure. So I am afraid that I will die. It is the deep, 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 all the way down underlying belief that's going, I'm afraid of dying. So I will do anything to not die. And it's anxiety 101. It's where I'm anxious, I'm afraid, give me something to make me feel better.
yeah. I had this experience with the current lady I'm working with, the pain specialist, and because I work with many people in the past, and you're working with a professional and they're educated and you respect their opinion, but there were certain things they kind of touch on, like, oh, well, it's this and it's causing that, and I'm like, oh, I don't know, that doesn't quite feel like that's
Mm.
kind of what's happening. And this lady said to me, she was poking around and asking me a lot of questions, and she told me, she goes, it's your body, you know it better than anybody. And I'm just like, oh, yeah, you're right. It's like with that awareness I was talking about, I was still kind of outsourcing a little bit to her
Yeah.
because she was doing the treatment. She goes, it's your body. You know it better than anyone. It's like, yeah, I do.
Emma and I were having a laugh the other day about chiros, and chiros are in an interesting category, and people have different opinions on chiros. But it's funny, we've been to the same one, and he goes, oh, and that's the spot there, and he makes the adjustment. He goes, oh, you felt that, didn't you? And it's so suggestive, it's
Yeah.
so leading, it's so, and on one level, you've been trained to say yes, but then you override that and sit with it and think about it and go, I don't think I actually felt anything. No, you did. The heat's really reduced out of that spot now, and oh, that was a good one. I haven't had a crack like that for a while. You know, you did really well there. I'm like, are you trying to convince me or yourself?
Yeah, it's like I think because as well we're both trained in like hypnotherapy and stuff, and we understand that power of suggestion. So yeah, I'll often like in but back in the past I would say whatever. Like, oh, I knew that your left toe twitched when I did that in your neck. I'm like, yeah, it did, right? But now I'm like, no, it didn't. That didn't happen at
So I think the medicating normal. A big thing in what we're doing here is educating. Pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. That's just a philosophy we use in here. So we can change pain to suffering, and then suffering to unnecessary suffering. So we're going to suffer, but then there's unnecessary suffering, and people have been trained that feeling sad or feeling angry or feeling afraid or feeling embarrassed, these are bad feelings, and they're negative emotions. And if you ever feel these things, it's bad to feel them, and you don't want to feel them. So you have to go and change them and as quickly as you can to feel good feelings or positive emotions. And we're so focused on helping people to surrender to if it's appropriate to feel sad, then please just sit and allow yourself to be sad. If you need to, anger's an interesting one. There's something called dharmic anger, and we had the whole Nick is Angry episode podcast, and you can still be angry without it being triggered reactive anxiety based anger. So sometimes anger is appropriate. It's important to feel embarrassed about things sometimes because I stepped outside of my lane there. Okay, so that's an acknowledgement of some sort. So there's every single emotion on the mental health spectrum. The spectrum of human emotions is equal. They are all equal. But our minds are so conditioned to operating at the unpleasant end of the spectrum and wanting to be at the other end, but the wanting to be at the other end is compounding the existence at the other end. So, there's so much work that we can do, and it's not, it's hard initially, but then it gets easy, and it's like, all right, suddenly my brain's functioning in a way that I'm generally at the pleasant end of the spectrum, and something happens, and I can traverse down to the other end of the spectrum and feel sad, but then I'll come back to this is my normal state now.
It's a really important point. It's not the emotional state that's causing you the problem. It's your mind's judgment of the emotional state.
So we call it getting distorted at the distortions and disturbed at the
Yeah.
I'm anxious about being angry. I'm anxious about being anxious. I'm angry about being angry. I'm sad about being sad.
Yeah.
How's that working for you?
It's just I'm wrestling with reality in that moment, and it's like as soon as you can, and a practice is like next time you are sad or angry or whatever, watch the mind create the narrative and the story, and then just keep coming back to the actual experience of the emotion in your body. Then the mind will want to run away with it again, come back to the experience of your body. And when you train that attention, it might link up with what we kind of started with, but that fella in Kmart the other day, after the anger passed through, and I was kind of having trouble describing it. I said I kind of took on the collective, but it was really a state of sorrow in that moment. And there wasn't too many stories. And in the moment, like looking back on it now, it was kind of beautiful,
It was appropriate. It was Ram Dass talks about suffering can be grace. And I love that. Suffering can be grace. And
yeah.
I said to you after you described it, I said, what a beautiful overall experience.
And so that's that the training, that's where we can get. It's like imagine feeling sadness, sorrow, hurt, whatever it was, and that was perfectly okay. It was even beautiful. When I say beautiful, it's not like I'm happy or I'm excited that I'm in sorrow. It's not like that. It's just a complete acceptance of that state. That's why I could let some tears come down my face in the middle of Kmart. And there's a beauty to that. And I think that's such an important point. It's that when the mind steps in, it becomes a problem.
But you said pay attention to the body. But what if people are wearing the labels of ADHD and I can't pay attention?
What's the mind? What's the mind saying they can't do it?
But also,
the mind won't fix the mind.
We've been talking to clients about intervening and interfering, and we're interfering in a lot of other people's business, but instead of intervening in our own business. And so intervening is internal, interfering is external. So if we can intervene, and when we come into the awareness that we are, changing into a different emotional state, we can ask ourselves, is this appropriate? Just a simple little question. Is this appropriate? Is it appropriate to feel sad right now? Yeah, um, someone just passed away. Okay. What's the play here? If I go to my playbook, what's the play? Feel sad. Okay. All right, I'm going to feel sad for a bit. And what do? Let the tears come, and I'll do their job and let it in the front door, let it out the back door. Okay. And by the way, this is temporary. Oh, well, that's good. Okay, radio. And you can actually experience gratitude for the time that you had with the person as well. Oh, that's a weird recipe, but okay, I'll try that.
This sounds like a manual, an instruction booklet that we should get very early in life. Maybe even learn it in school.
We're creating it. Don't worry.
Good.
It's on the radar. It's on the radar.
Good.
Where conversely, I'm feeling sad. Oh, right. Is this appropriate? What's happening right now? Someone called me a loser. Yeah, not really appropriate to feel sad right now. This says more about them than it says about me. The appropriate state here is compassion. Oh, I'm sorry you're feeling that way. I'm sorry you're having that experience. Oh, it's got nothing to do with me. I'm sorry you're in suffering and you're projecting that suffering onto me. Are you okay? Do you want to come and have a chat? Well, fuck off, you loser. All right, no, you can't reach you, so be it. Have a wonderful day, and off I go. I don't need to be affected by that.
Yeah. Love it, Nico. I love it.
I love you.
Wrap it up there. I love you too, mate. Me and Nick are playing golf tomorrow.
It's
piss missiles every hole.
Piss missiles. And hosel rockets probably.
Yeah. It's a golf. We're in a golf with me, so you'll get both. There's no doubt about
that. We should make t-shirts. We should make t-shirts up. Piss missiles and hosel rockets.
Yes. I love it. All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. We hope you took something out of that, and we'll see you all next week. Nico, peace out.
Shout out to our friend in British Columbia,
Alison. Shout out to you.
Alison.